On November 18th, 1978, in an isolated place called Jonestown, a man named Jim Jones ordered his followers to drink Flavor Aid laced with cyanide, which resulted in the deaths of 918 people in an event that came to be known as the Jonestown Massacre. Among the numerous questions that enter one's mind upon hearing about this, one of the predominant ones is surely, how?
We're all ready to go. If you tell us we have to give our lives now, we're ready. I'm pretty sure all the rest of the sisters and brothers are with me.
How can a man convince anyone, let alone this many people, to commit such an atrocity? Midnight Mass seeks to explore the answer to this question. The limited series takes place almost exclusively on Crockett Island, and in its 7-episode run, we watch and observe this island descend into absolute hell. A descent sparked by the arrival of a new, charismatic priest who claims to bring miracles. But first, we're given an introduction to the island before his arrival. In one of the earliest scenes, a boy gets on his bike and rides around town, giving us an opportunity to familiarize ourselves with the island and its residents. And it's a bit different than what some would presume.
The people on this island, we used to be hundreds. Now we're just dozens. This isn't a community anymore, honey. It's a ghost.
This isn't the story of a quaint little town poisoned by the arrival of an organized malicious group. This is an already dying community, with the seeds of fanaticism and zealotry already present. It's still a long ways away from what it devolves into, but the very subtle ways it excluded people whom they deemed tainted or other were always there. Among the excluded, we learn, is an alcoholic, Riley, who is wrought with guilt over the accident he caused in his drunken stupor, resulting in the death of a young girl. Then there's Erin Green, who left the island to pursue her dreams of making it big, only to come back pregnant and without a husband. Then there's also Sheriff Hassan, who is a Muslim. Sheriff Hassan joined the force in a genuine attempt to help his country, but was similarly discriminated against until he chose to run away with his son to Crockett Island, where he now presents himself as innocuous and as polite as he can, even in the face of what is honestly a pretty admirable level of skill and passive aggressiveness. But these are some of the people who are seen as the dregs of this society. But it's from here that something interesting happens. As the excluded begin to start encouraging each other and finding solace in each other, as Riley walked alone after being shamed by his own family and community, he sees an inviting smile from Erin, and from there they become each other's support group. And it's partly due to the strength and self-confidence he gained from this relationship that helped him look at another recovering alcoholic in the eye and tell him that it's okay to have made mistakes. As opposed to the expectations of the community, he tells him that it's enough that he's here trying to be better today. It won't always be enough, but it's enough today. And from that, you can see Joe's giddiness at the prospect of redemption. Now let's juxtapose this with the alternate path of St. Patrick's Church, which actually starts out with a well-meaning priest who genuinely does a lot of good, but the attention the church gains from that exposes something important. After he helps Lisa walk again, we see crowds of people gather outside his home, begging him to heal their sick family members. And here, for the first time, one of the most important truths of the story is presented plainly. The truth that a lot of people are attracted to religion not because they resonate with its teachings like some of the others, but because it aligns with their own self-interests. This slowly unravels more and more in the later episodes, but basically, religion allows people to run away from life's tragedies, provides clear answers to the unknown, lifts the burden of responsibility from them, and most of all, makes them part of a family. It's a very beneficial transaction. But the series makes sure that we look at them not with contempt, but with empathy. These are desperate people vulnerable to exploitation. Like what initially attracted many people to Jim Jones was his advocacy for racial equality.
What do you find that's wrong with this place?
Oh, I don't find anything wrong. I had more opportunities here than I ever had in the States.
luring in the vulnerable and targeting their weaknesses. It's time to talk about Ms. Keen. Miss Keen has a particular knack for getting people to bend to her will. As we've discussed, a variety of different reasons led people to St. Patrick's Church. Sniffing out and attacking those reasons is where Miss Keen shines through. She's a master of controlling perspective. In her many speeches, you can see her cycling through her every means of control. She appeals to rewards, offering you love and acceptance. If that doesn't work, she appeals to punishments, to your base desires, to hate. And then finally to the strongest of them all, shame. Weaponizing a person's past or circumstances to make them surrender.
Do not cherry-pick the glories of God!
This allows her to even manipulate Monsignor Pruitt and to hijack his vision and teachings to suit her own. Once again, this controlling of the frame was used by Jim Jones as well, as anyone who so much as expressed the desire to leave his town would be given labels such as sinner, traitor, wearing them down and bringing shame upon them. But while this works on an individual level, to exert this control on a larger scale, a much more drastic but deliberate process is required. And so slowly but surely, the church began to unveil its true nature. As the sermons turned more and more radical, the discrimination more and more overt, one by one the followers were exposed to the darker truths behind the scenes. And little by little they were asked to take more extreme actions, until finally, once this gang of loyal thugs were established, the time came to isolate the island, cutting off all communication with the outside world and creating a true echo chamber, almost like the creation of Jonestown itself. This is where the conflict with the others comes in. Those who spent the story accepting their flaws, wrestling with it, and finding their own solutions to it. Taking the long, hard road as opposed to surrendering everything to people who claim to know. And that's what this story was all about, showing us how these people dealt with life's problems and their antithesis. There's this one pretty neat scene in particular between Riley and Erin, where both of them ponder over what happens after death. And it's a moment where they're simultaneously accepting that they don't know, while also allowing themselves to indulge in the fantasy of what they want it to be. It gives us an idea of who they are and what they wish for. Riley, an atheist who says he only believes in logic and reasoning, starts by talking about how all the organs and all the brain cells start shutting down one by one, but then slowly transitions into there being one short flash of memories at the very end, where he gets to reflect on his life a final time before putting it all behind him. Because what he wants most is to put that memory behind him. Erin then follows by giving her own version, and this theme evolves later on, but the importance of this scene is that it introduces the symbol that encapsulates the most important element of the story. Death in Midnight Mass acts as a representative of all the suffering in the world. Death is the ultimate unknown, the ultimate inevitability, the ultimate suffering, and the embodiment of tragedy. Monsignor Pruitt, with his power to defy death, sought to end all suffering, which is ironic because in the end, everyone dies. Like, no one makes it except these two. To make any kind of sense of this ending, I have to point you towards a certain piece of dialogue from the show. A piece of dialogue that was plastered on all the letters, tweets, and promotional material leading up to release. The line reads that even in the darkness, in the worst of it, in the absence of light and hope, we sing. Ask a man at rock bottom what he has left, and the answer would be hope. Hope was the poison in this story that everyone clung to, and everyone clung to it so tightly and for so long that by the end, we've reached such a hell that even that is no more. Once the sun rises, everyone will die. That is certain. So the question arises, what lies beyond hope? And what the answer seems to be is honesty and acceptance. As the line foreshadowed, everyone came together and began to sing. Songs and hymns were something very prevalent in the story, and what they always seemed to portray was family. For anyone from the outside looking in, this site looks very much like a haunting picture of a deluded cult. But in those groups, you see people comforting each other and loving each other. Throughout the show, but in the final episodes especially, we saw people asking for forgiveness and providing it. We saw people asking for comfort and providing it. We saw people asking for validation and providing it. This wasn't about whether or not they deserved it. They didn't. None of them did. None of them earned it. This was more so about them needing it. People so torn down and fearful of the harshness of reality that they would turn to anyone or anything that promises to take it away from them. Midnight Mass isn't really a critique of religion itself. In fact, many of the characters presented in a positive light stay true to their different faiths till the end. Instead, it portrays the many ways religion can be used as a tool for manipulation and for escapism. The residents of Crockett Island spent the story using religion to paint their intentions as something noble or greater than. But in these final moments, they shed all of that and just honestly indulge in their desires as Riley and Erin did back then. Elsewhere, we see more of the same with Monsignor Pruitt, who revealed that at the core of his actions was a desire for a second chance with his family. Monsignor Pruitt had lived a pretty honorable life, but his regrets, coupled with his fear of death, led him to come back and destroy everything. However, after seeing the error of his ways and accepting his end this time around, he gets to spend his final moments with his family. Ali and Sheriff Hassan had twisted, distorted, and outright chopped out parts of themselves to conform to the people around them, because they would only ever be accepted on their terms and values. As compared to the others who preached and prayed openly, they could only do so out in the mainland or in their home. But in the end, they embraced themselves wholly, praying openly without fear of judgment. As for acceptance, they only ever really needed each other and God. However, Miss Keene was a different case. For her, it was about more than acceptance or comfort or anything of the sort. When Father Paul performed that miracle at the altar, among all the other things, it also meant that they were special. That the people here weren't nobodies on a dying island, but were in fact chosen. And maybe there was an aspect of that present in everyone, like the father who held resentment against his own son for wanting to leave the island for a better life. But by the end, even he learns to grow from that. Miss Keene, however, was too absorbed in it. For her, it was about superiority, which is why her death was the hardest for her to accept. She spent the story pushing others down, but in the end desperately clawed on the earth to bury herself in it. And hey, there's honesty in that as well. Erin's final monologue ties it all together, as everyone not only makes peace with death and suffering, but also acknowledges the need for it. The last line of the show being,
I can't feel my legs.
followed by a smile.